Well, thank you guys for coming today. I really appreciate it. I always give the disclaimer, I am a writer, not a public speaker, so you'll have to bear with me because I always get a little bit nervous before I do these presentations. But today I'm here to talk about unique places to visit in the region. And for those of you who I have not met, I run a website called OzarksAlive.com that gives me an excuse to kind of wander around and write stories about a lot of different places and pieces of history. And it's actually let me meet a lot of unique people and special people too. It's how I've met Julie and people here at the museum. I've told the story several times about how when I was doing a story about the Wizard of Oto, I came in here and I was asking about information, and Julie loaded me into her car and took me out to Oto to show me where it was. Like, you can't get more helpful people than that. And so that's been one of the best stories from doing these stories. But as I've done these stories, which I guess I talk instead of doing my slides. Why are we here? Those stories, why are we here? And I'm not talking about why are we here in the grand scheme of life, but today we're here to talk about some of those unique places and people and stories that define the region. And, you know, I do have, I think it's around 10 different places I would suggest that you visit if you're out and about. But really, it's also about the history behind them. So there are several of them that, you know, I think the backstory is as fascinating as the actual attraction. So we'll get into those as we go along. The first one, and I feel especially nervous talking about this because it's a Stone County thing, but I want to go ahead and mention the Wye Bridge. And I assume that most of you have been to the Wye Bridge. I know there's the whole deal about you don't visit places in your hometown, so maybe there are a few of you who haven't been there, but if you have or have not, I would encourage you to go visit this really unique place. And, you know, hopefully, probably this is a repeat for some of you on the history of it, but I just think it's fascinating. And it's one of the places I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know about until I just drove past it one day, probably a few years ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this amazing bridge right here? And I stopped and looked at it, and of course, you know, it's just beautiful. It's this work of art, really, and I saw that there was a display there, and so I stopped and read about it. But then I really, once I left there, you know, knew I wanted to do a story and started delving into the history behind it. And so, you know, it's really interesting. This is from before the bridge was there, but as you probably know, this area became a tourist destination, even as far back as the 1800s, with float trips and Eureka Springs being relatively close by. People were really wanting to come to the area for a variety of different reasons. It was difficult to get here, though. I mean, especially back in the 1800s, you didn't even have a railroad here until the early 1900s, and so it was just very, very difficult. However, that said, when the railroad came in I think 1906, it really opened a whole new world around here, especially when you compiled that with Shepherd of the Hills publication in 1907. You had both a huge draw for people to come and a way for them to get here, which really began to increase the tourism around Stone County, around you know, where we would think of Reed Springs area as well. But this began to evolve as time went on, and what kind of happened in the 1920s that was a revolutionary thing in our society? The advent of personal cars. You know, more and more people were able to have their own cars, and yet there weren't a lot of good roads for them to get places on. And so there was a push around that time the good roads movement was in full force. You know, it's not tied to this, but you think Route 66 began in 1926, that was a 1920s thing. There was a big push for this, and it's no surprise, in line with those things, 1926 was when work began on the Wye Bridge. It was in line with all of those things. This goes back to the float trips, just another illustration about the popularity. It says there are summer resorts and vacation points where one can rest the body in indolent hammocks, and others where one may find the call to physical exercise. I'm guessing floating is probably more that physical exercise one. There are places that stir the blood of the hunter and the fisher, and others that appeal to the eye which seeks beauty. But never have I found in any one trip that came so nearly combining all of these as the float trip down the James and White Rivers in the Ozarks. So, and you know, that still hangs on. We still do a lot of floating today. So anyway, so 1926 was when construction began on the bridge. You still see that plaque there today. And it took several months. You know, it wasn't an overnight thing, but it was finally ready for unveiling in November of 1927. This was dedication day. And I want to read a couple of different newspaper excerpts from this because I think, I love old newspapers. They just kind of set the whole tone for things. But it says, this was one from the Stone County News Oracle in the issue after this dedication day. It says, a crowd estimated at about 3,000 attended the dedication ceremony of Stone County's new state highway bridge across James River at Galena last Sunday. The day was raw and cold, but in spite of all throughout points in southwest Missouri, some in Kansas City, Jefferson City, and St. Louis forgot that it was bad weather. They were so busy enjoying the new bridge. They had several different speakers throughout the day. One of them, another notable name around here was Dewey Short, who was the final speaker of the day and proclaimed, let's see if I can remember it right, that tourism was as important to the Ozarks as fruit, the cow, and the hen, if I remember that right. The hen is definitely one of them because you can't forget that. I mean, I don't know if it's a tie. I don't think there was pre-planning in this, but it was interesting. One article noticed about how they all feasted on chicken legs. I think there's got to be more to that, but I don't know the backstory of that exactly. But there was a note in that article about the food, and it didn't mention the chicken legs in this one, but it said the first thing on the program was a big basket dinner, and according to Dr. Kerr of Crane, I don't know who that was, but apparently a reliable source, he said the tables reached from Reed Spring to Ponce de Leon.
Quite a ways.
Yeah, it would be quite a ways. I don't know that that's exactly accurate, but then the paper says, anyway, there was plenty to eat. So we know, regardless of the distance, nobody went away hungry. And in effect, the day was a good one. The last paragraph of that story said, the celebration went off like clockwork, and publicity thus given Stone County will be far-reaching in its effects. Many people thought we were only a small bridge here across a small branch, but when they saw its magnitude and realized what it means to construct a bridge such as this one, they were indeed surprised. You think about back then, there weren't photos of the progress in newspapers, so you had to just kind of imagine what this was. Probably part of the reason so many people came in person. They wanted to see this as it was done. Had the day been warm and fair, our little town would not have accommodated all who came. So this puts in kind of perspective what magnitude this was for this region. And this is 1927, like I said, we're going to jump forward here. This is what it looked like in the 1950s. This was a photo that the news leader took back then, and you can kind of see it off on the side. This bridge continued serving this area, I think, through the mid-1980s, and I didn't see a lot of, we hear a lot these days about controversy over closing bridges and things like that, and I may just not have found the newspaper articles that talked about the controversy. It seemed pretty straightforward to me that in the mid-1980s, the bridge needed to be replaced, and they decided to turn it into a pedestrian bridge, which it is now. So, this is another picture of it today. The thing I found really interesting about this is, it is a bridge, and just a bridge, I guess, but I've been out there several times since that first visit, and I always see people around there. Even one day, I think it was the day I took these pictures, there were two teenage girls just walking across the bridge talking and laughing and stuff. And, you think about, it clearly is an ingrained part of the culture and a very cool place to have and be able to enjoy. So if you have not been out to the bridge, I would encourage you to do so. And you can think about those floaters who were going underneath the bridge way back when. And it still do, actually. I floated over here and got out at the Wye Bridge access point. So, or the Kerr, is that the Kerr one? I don't remember. But anyway, I've floated along here as well. So the Cox one, okay. So the next thing I'm going to jump into are Missouri show caves. Now, I will say up front, I really don't like caves, which might make you wonder, why am I talking about them? But I feel that, number one, they are such a big part of Missouri's history that you can't ignore them. And two, I like the stories behind them. So these are two things here that I'm going to get more into with a few of these places briefly. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Bluff Dwellers Cave out in McDonald County. This is another place. I think I just learned about it when I was driving down the road and saw a billboard for it. But it's a cave down in McDonald County, down in Knoll, or Noel if we're in December. That has been open to the public since the 1920s. It's very beautiful. I'm not going to be able to tell you anything about this picture other than I know that this is a stalagmite because I learned that in 6th grade. Because remember, the tight ones hang from the ground or from the ceiling, and the mites grow up from the ground. So I can tell you that. I think that's true. I think it looks really pretty. I know there are critters that live in it, like bats and other reptilian creatures. I know that this is called the lake in there. This is Crystal Lake, which is a very still body of water that's been in there ever since explorers have been in it in this modern time. And I can also tell you that there is a very unique creature that lives in this cave. Probably no other cave in the world has this creature, and that is the duck. The cave duck has lived in this cave since the 1950s. And of course, it's a joke that they talk about now, but it was something that, I don't know how the duck got in there to begin with. Clearly did not wander in on its own. But it's something that little kids love, because they might be scared. The cave's kind of a scary, dark place, and they see that duck and they think it's hilarious. So the cave duck has lived, and it also shows the preservation of not being out in sunlight, because that duck's been there for like 75 years or something. He's still looking pretty good. So you can visit the cave and see all these things. But I want to back up for a second and talk about the origins of this cave in modern times, because, like I said, it is a very long-standing attraction here in the Ozarks. This picture was from around when it opened to the public in 1927. It had been discovered sometime before that by a man named Arthur Browning, who lived in that area. He was walking out one day, felt some cold air, and realized after some investigating that there was a cave there. And they went inside and realized it was beautiful and thought that the public would like to know about it. Now, I want to jump back to what I said at the beginning here, because this was actually a really kind of a new concept to open a cave to the public back then. It was not the first show cave, but once again, there weren't a lot of ways for people to see these places when there weren't roads. And so it was difficult. But once the 20s, 30s, 40s came along, show caves exploded in Missouri and were everywhere. And a lot of them have closed. There are still, of course, ones that are open today, like Bluff Dwellers. But it was kind of a trendsetter in the grand scheme of things. Which is why I'm going to segue again here and talk about somebody who I find fascinating. I think I should just do an article about him sometime, because he's really, really interesting to me. And it's a guy named J.A. Dad Truitt. He's known as the caveman, or the caveman of the Ozarks. And actually, if you decide after hearing about him that you want to learn more, there's an entire book written about him called From the Cradle to the Cave. So, that sets the tone. J.A. was not an Ozarks native. He moved here with his wife, I think in 1914. But he had always loved caves, had been a guide out at Cave of the Winds in Colorado as a teenager. And somehow, I don't know exactly how, but got into the show cave development business in McDonald County, and ended up finding or working as a promoter for many different caves in that area, which I'm a little confused about, because like he would find a cave, development, open it to the public, and move on to another one. And I'm like, didn't those people have him sign a non-compete agreement? Because, you'd have like 6 or 7 different caves, and they're all in like a really close area. So, but anyway, that was his life's work, was he went from cave to cave and developed them and opened them into his, this book was written, I think, when he was 89, and he was just getting ready to open another one. So it was a lifelong thing, for sure. I know that he was connected with Bluff Dwellers in some capacity. I don't really understand what that connection was. This book mentions it quite a lot, and so I know that it was a thing he was focused on. I think there may have been some bad feelings with the family that discovered it, though, because whenever I asked some questions in the interview when I did the story, it was kind of vague on what, there wasn't a lot of people, they wouldn't want to talk much about that. So I'm not sure if, and that I may be just jumping to conclusions, but I get the sense that maybe there was some, not everybody was super happy about the arrangement at the time. But anyway, he was a huge force, like I said, and so you can visit, Bluff Dwellers that he was connected with. But there's another cave down there that's still a place you can go and visit as well that was tied to him, and that's a place that's known today as the Cave. It's very imaginative. But back in the day, it was known as Truitt's Cave, named after him. And it was a place to go eat for many years. We'll get to the fact that it is actually a place to eat now as well. But it was said, it had this Ripley's connection, where it had the only fireplace in the world with natural flue through a mountain and a living spring flowing beneath, because that means you need to eat there. Those things, big deal. But of course, it also had cave formations and things that they promoted as well. So it was kind of a combination attraction. Today, this is the exterior of the cave. It's got a very unique story of its own right now. This man, at least as of when I did the article, owned the cave. And he bought the cave because he was convinced that the world was going to end. And he moved here from somewhere else to live in the cave and wait for the end of the world. And he bought the goats because they needed something to eat after the world ended. So the world's end did not come on schedule. I think there was a set day he thought it was going to happen, and it did not happen. And so he decided he needed a way to make money, and so he opened a restaurant. It's okay to laugh. It's a very unusual story, but it's a restaurant. You can go and eat at the restaurant. You can pet the goats. I'm sorry? They do not serve goat, as far as I know. But they serve a lot of burgers. That was, at least when I was there, that was their primary thing, was burgers. And it is cool. He and his wife, they had no restaurant experience. I think he was in IT for the Department of Defense. His wife was a principal or something, and so they were very excited that they had remade themselves into a new career, which, it's a very unusual, cool story. It's just very unusual. So anyway, that's another place when you're down that way. Bluff Dwellers, like I said, is in Knoll. This cave is in Lanigan area. So they're both pretty close together, but that'd make kind of a unique day trip out that way. The third cave, and then I'll get off caves, I'm going to talk about is Talking Rock's Cavern, also here in Stone County, which, I say this before every one of these things. I just found it so interesting as I got into it. But Talking Rock's Cavern is one of the, first tourist attractions of this area. Of course, first in terms of it took thousands and thousands of years for it to form, but first also in terms of bringing people here and giving them something to do. That's because, and it goes back to this guy. Well, this guy was part of it. This is Waldo Powell, who is posing in the entrance to Talking Rocks, as it was in the past. But this came to be as a public attraction because of the Powell family. His father, Truman Powell, moved to the area back many, many years ago. He was a newspaperman who moved down here from Lamar most recently because of health issues. Moved to the area and ended up staying. But they discovered this cave at some point and eventually decided that they wanted to turn it into a tourist attraction. Now, they also have kind of a unique element of this, and I'll keep moving through these pictures. That's one of the first buildings when they first opened. It says Fairy Cave because originally that was its name. They called it Fairy Cave because they believed it looked like a fairy wonderland in there. And it was, a draw, I guess, from the, early on when it opened. It's interesting. You've got Fairy Cave, and then of course you've got Marble Cave over at Silver Dollar City that aren't too far apart, but they kind of coexisted. But the other element of this was that both Truman Powell and Waldo Powell, the guy that you saw in the picture, were said to be connected with characters in Shepherd of the Hills. So they were not, there was a lot of speculation back then about who provided the inspiration for the characters in the book, and really only one person, Uncle Ike, was said to be tied to Levi Morrill. That was a definite connection, but everyone else, it was up for speculation, which of course was a great deal for tourists because you could say, we believe that this is so-and-so. And so since two of the characters, the shepherd, who was said to be Truman Powell, and Ollie, who was said to be Waldo Powell, filled these roles, it was a great tourist attraction because of that too. That's one of the Powells as well. But it's also a great tourist attraction because of someone named Pearl Spurlock, who you've probably heard of before. This was Miss Spurlock. And she tied all this together because this, I would say, was the first bus tour of the area, of the Ozarks, really. Before there were roads, and we talked about our good roads anyway, she would pick up tourists at the train station and take them on trips to all these spots that they needed to see. And Talking Rock / Fairy Cave was one of the places she went. And she would, position this as, you're going to go see characters from this book. And so that was a huge draw. I was fortunate to get to interview a guy named Walker Powell before he passed away. He was the grandson of Truman Powell and actually remembered the cave opening back in the 1920s. He's since passed away, but I talked to him a few years ago. He was in his late 90s. And he said that, as a teenager, he did not really appreciate being pointed out every time someone showed up. as the grandson as Shepherd of the Hills. So a teenager didn't find that too fun. But anyway, that was her gimmick, I guess you could say. That I say gimmick in a nice way. It was a great way to show people the Ozarks, but just to prove a point about how, daring really this lady was to drive all these people around in her car. This was one of the roads that she drove people over. Road is kind of I don't know that that's the right word for this, but it was the version of the road she went down. And so you can imagine how much of an adventure it would have been perusing the Ozarks back then. But anyway, it did get Fairy Cave shown to a lot of people. These are some of the formations from inside the cave. Like I started out saying today, this is known as Talking Rocks Cavern. It was known as Fairy Cave through the late 1960s. The Powell family continued to own it. But then they eventually sold it. I believe it was 1969. Does anyone know who they sold it to? Surprised me when I found out. The Hershens. The Hershens own it. So they own this and, of course, Marvel Cave over at Silver Dollar City. And I don't know why that was the case. I don't know, why they decided to do that. But they did, and they've maintained ownership of it ever since. And it's, completely operated as a separate attraction and everything. But it was amazing to me going in there and thinking about how this was something that some of the very early tourists to the Ozarks had seen. I will say this, like I said, I know nothing about caves. I learned one thing, though, on this trip and to this cave. And that is something that I think would be obvious to everyone else, but somehow it did not sink into me. And that is when it rains, cave tours turn into water rides. This is a picture of me in the cave the day that I was there. I'll always remember this day because it was the Saturday of those horrific floods we had in April of 2017. And it was just like a shower when you went in there. It was like just water everywhere. And somehow I've gotten the message from all of the advertisements that it's a constant temperature in caves year round. But I had not gotten the message about how avoid rainy days. But I will remember that forever. So the next thing I'm going to shift in a little bit of a different direction, more towards the Ozark Douglas County area, and talk about some of the very popular mills that are cool places to visit. I think it's interesting, and I don't have any facts to back this up, but I know that we don't have a lot of mills that are left. You see old schools and churches and things like that pretty often, but not mills as much. And I think that they exist in this area, the Douglas Ozark County areas, because there was an effort like in the 70s, 80s to do like mill tours down around that area. And so you had enough interest at that point to revive these buildings to a state that they weren't going to fall down, at least as quickly as ones in other areas. But the first one I'm going to talk about is a place called Topaz Mill, which is one of my most favorite places that I've done. It's a very, very cool destination. I will say that this was an experience getting to this place. I felt like I was on a road back like that one that Pearl Spurlock was driving. And I'm no stranger to gravel roads. I drive on them all the time and don't bother me. But I did, even have to pause when I looked over and saw the remnants of a campfire in the middle of the road and thought perhaps this is not the road most traveled. I will say that after I arrived, I was told that I took the bad road, and there is a much better way to get there should you choose to visit. But Topaz Mill is part of the community of Topaz. This was what it looked like in 1967. It was an article that the Ozark Mountaineer did. And Topaz was a pretty typical little town, I think, from back in the day. They had a store building, which you can see. The mill is that next one. They had post office, barber shop there, but this town was actually pretty short-lived compared to some of the others, and really around the time World War II came along was fairly non-existent anymore. That said, this is still what it looks like now. You can kind of see it looks actually better than it did back in the 60s, and that's because back in the 1950s, a family purchased the town of Topaz, if you can purchase a town or the remnants of it, and moved down here from Republic. They were farmers, and you might recall or have heard that there was a drought in the 1950s and was difficult for people back then. And so they wanted to relocate someplace with a water source. And so this advertisement talked about, mill spring, lots of flowing water and all of this. And so they purchased this and moved everything down there. And the same family still owns it. Since they purchased it, one particular family member was very enthused about restoring parts of it. I guess there'd been actually a family connection with knowing about how mills worked, and so there was a kind of a deep affection for that technology and everything. And just has gradually restored things, and at least, in addition to restoring, just maintained as well, because there's just a lot of cool things to go in and see in these places. This is inside the store building. You still see things like the paper roll, the signage. I didn't have an interior picture, but it's just this really big room with all sorts of different things to see. The thing I liked even more than that, though, is the mill. Well, there's another picture of the mill, but the mill itself, it still has all the old machinery. It even still has the old barber chair from when it had the barber shop, and you can see on the wall, haircuts 25 cents, tonic 10 cents. And it's like a time capsule, that just was locked up and kind of left in a sense that it wasn't left to fall down, but left in that we didn't disturb it. And so it's just a really, really cool place. The owners today, it's like I said, it's still the same family, but they love showing off this place. And so anyone who wants to come down and visit, they'll give tours and talk about this as much as somebody wants to hear. It's free to visit. They don't charge anything. They do have a nonprofit established to take donations to help upkeep it. But it's just a very cool chance to see that this is exactly how something was in the past that hasn't been altered really at all.
What's a tonic?
It's like a thing with a shave, isn't it? Like, I've not studied old-fashioned barbering, so I'm not. Oh, in the hair. Oh, there you go. Now we both know.
It's like wild cream oil.
Yeah. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Rockbridge, which probably a few more of you have been to if you've been out that way. Rockbridge has been preserved in a different way than Topaz, because today Rockbridge is really a destination in Ozark County. It was also a small town. It started back in the early 1800s, was I think at one point the county seat of Ozark County, and up until just a couple years ago had the oldest post office in Ozark County, because they still operated out of the main store building there. And I think they've been in operation since something like 1842, something ridiculously long. But Rockbridge today still has the old mill building, which you can see there. This picture was also taken after the April 2017 flood, so that's why it's kind of not perfect. But it is a destination for a bunch of different reasons. You have the mill itself, where there's a restaurant and kind of bar area. You can see where that railing is. And then they also have places to stay. They're a big place to go fishing and shooting and things like that. But then they also have a regular restaurant that's over in a building behind this mill, which, there's another older picture of the mill. But this is the building where the building sits. This is not the same building where the restaurant is now, because that burned. But they rebuilt it very similarly. And it's just a really cool place to go and feel like you're in a different world almost. It's very remote and beautiful, and I would suggest any time of year. They're open all year these days, but especially once trees start greening up, it would be a great time to go down there and check it out. Especially if you're doing this like day trip, you can hit Topaz first and see that, and then go on to Rockbridge. And then the last mill I'm going to talk about, that's more of this. Yeah, I just keep talking. I like to talk too much. Is Hodgson Mill, which is here, and I would bet that most of you have at least seen pictures of Hodgson, because this is not a reliable statistic, because I don't remember where I heard it, but I heard at some place that Hodgson is the most recognizable mill in the world or something. And part of that, I would guess, if that is true, is tied to the fact that there is a brand of food called Hodgson Mill, and it's because of this mill. It wasn't a coincidence. This mill, I have not written a story about this mill. It's on my list. But so I'm not sure about as many of the specifics as I am about some of these places. But this mill fascinates me because it was a tourist attraction long before any of the others were. I found newspaper articles back to the 1940s talking about people gathering at Hodgson Mill for different events. The State Chamber of Commerce leaders met there one year for their convention. It was, a destination on maps for a long time. The mill has gone through a series of, owners and different purposes. It no longer grinds any kind of meal or anything like that. The business that, is called Hodgson Mill does not operate out of here at all. I think they're in Illinois. But the thing that I find especially interesting about this is as far as I've been able to tell, the owner of this mill does not live in the Ozarks. The owner lives in Mississippi, and is actually, from what I've been able to find out, an attorney down there who is very interested in historic preservation and restoration projects. And so I did call his office at one point when I started to do an article, and I didn't hear back from him, so I need to get back on that again. But I just wonder what his ultimate purpose is with this, because I stopped in at the local gas station. You know, everybody knows everything at the gas station. And they didn't even really know what the plan was with the mill. It used to be open to the public for tours and things like that. It's not anymore. The signage is still out there. It's not in the picture, but like, you know, gift shop and hours and stuff from the past. But it looks like they still allow people to visit. That said, I visit at your own risk from anywhere other than the road, because it is technically private property, but there are picnic tables and it's maintained, and there aren't any no trespassing signs. So I think it's a fairly safe bet that they're okay with visitors, you know, taking a picnic lunch out there, or some snacks or whatever. But if nothing else, it's a really cool place to drive by, because it's just beautiful with that waterfall and everything. And just, it's a great scenic spot to check out.
Did you take that photo?
I did.
Very nice.
Oh, thank you. Panoramic function on iPhones is helpful. So the next place I'm going to talk about is a place called Spencer's Sweet Call, which is an old-fashioned candy store out in Webb City. Spencer's is not its original name. The original name of the store was the Minerva, and this is a picture from the past. But the Minerva was started by a family of Greek origin in the early 1900s in Webb City, and developed a really big following over the subsequent decades. They were especially well known for their chocolate Easter eggs at Easter time, and they were known for their candy canes at Christmas time. And this picture is from 1980, I think. Yeah, Mike back there did the story and took the picture of this back then. But this was one of the Mallos family that they were not the founding family. It was actually purchased, I think, relatively soon after it started, but they owned it for the majority of the time it was around. And they operated until around 2008, I believe, if I remember correctly, and then it closed. It was purchased by a couple who tried to reopen it, did a lot of work restoring the building. Ultimately, that did not work, and they ended up selling it again to a couple who reopened it, and now it is open. It's been open for the last couple of years. This man is Charles Spencer. He's one of the people who purchased it. He and his wife are the ones who own it. He's actually a minister. She's in some kind of education work, but he had been an amateur candy making enthusiast, and found the listing for the store one day when he was trying to find some used candy equipment, and ended up just buying the store instead. So it was kind of an unexpected purchase. But they came down, I think they lived in Lee Summit, and this is their new project. This is what they're doing. They make all the candies there, except for ones that are they've got some penny candy and jar candy that people recognize, but the vast majority of stuff they all make themselves. The thing he said was interesting was learning how to scale up, because he was used to making small batches for himself and things, but now having to make it for a store is a whole different ballgame, and learning how to scale up and down ingredients. This is the inside of the store. You can kind of see the tile work on the floor is just amazing. It's so intricate, and even you kind of saw it in this picture, but the back bar is just covered with mirrors everywhere. It's just a stunningly beautiful space. And their candy is all very good. They also have other things too. They have homemade ice cream, pies, cakes, cinnamon rolls, all sorts of things like that. And the really unique thing I found was that this year they brought back the candy canes. And so they had the old candy making equipment, which I had never seen in action. And unfortunately, I don't have a very good picture of it. But it is this thing down here. You can see that the light is a flame. And they have this big ball of dough, such as it is, that they string out, and the flame keeps it warm enough to be moldable. And they string it out, and then they cut it with scissors, and then they mold it into the candy cane, and it hardens like that. So it was really interesting, and just super cool. I mean, who else makes candy canes around here? It's a really neat place. And so if you're out by around Joplin, I would encourage you to make a stop in there and see them. And on to more food stuff. I figured I would talk about the Ozark Cafe as well. it's hard with restaurants sometimes because longtime restaurants always have cool stories, but a lot of it ties to the fact that the food is just really good and it's just continued. So as far as like notable things to talk about, that's always a little bit difficult sometimes. But the Ozark Cafe in Jasper is an exception because in addition to having amazing food and being a local hangout, it's also nationally and internationally known. This restaurant, it dates back to the very early 1900s when it started on the square in Jasper. I will note, don't get this confused, there is an Ozark Cafe, I believe, in Berryville as well. So this is the one in Jasper, which, if you're familiar with Arkansas, is in the middle of Buffalo River country. So it's a very beautiful, scenic area. And also, once again, go back to the roads. This presentation, it's like all presentations lead back to the roads. It was very difficult to get to until recent years because of very, gravel, curvy roads that led down into Jasper. So for many years, the majority of its existence, this was just a local hangout. But with the development of the Buffalo River as a tourist destination, this began to get a lot more popular and eventually caught the attention of the New York Times as well as Man vs. Food. It's been featured nationally. And even the day I was there doing the story, there was a guy from England who was there and had heard about it and wanted to check it out. So it's a very cool place. But that said, it's still a place where the locals come. I didn't ask them. I'm not thinking those people on the left are tourists. Maybe they are. Yeah, but it's a place that's remained a really authentic stop for locals in that area as well. And they do lots of things. They've got Saturday night music. That's a picture in here too. Saturday night music. They do quirky things like the menus printed on newspaper. That's what that woman was reading when we saw that in that first picture. They also, of course, do have some dishes of food that are very kind of noteworthy for them. One of them is called the Excalibur, which is this ginormous burger that's got a knife in it because it's so big it needs to hold it together. And it's another another really unique aspect of this, and it doesn't have to do with the food, but it just has to do with the atmosphere and kind of feel of this place, is that the current owners, I think, have owned it for a few years now, not terribly long. But they told me the story about how years ago, the woman that's a husband and wife, and then her daughter and her son-in-law who own it together, she had lived in the area for a long time, and back in the day, she was pregnant with her daughter, who's the other co-owner. And back then, they're so remote from everything else that it was hard to get to the hospital to have a baby. And so the deal was, if you could arrange it, because we could arrange that so well, and plan ahead, you could have it at the nursing home because there was a suite that the doctor, like the local doctor, could meet you there, and you could have it. You could have it at the nursing home because it was too hard to get to the hospital. You have to go to someplace far away. And so she had the baby. That all worked out. She had the baby there. And of course, shockingly, she didn't feel like making lunch after she got home from having the baby. And so they stopped at the Ozark Cafe and had lunch right after she had the baby. And so she and her, this was her daughter's first stop anywhere probably in her life. And then she ended up owning the restaurant later. So it's probably just destiny. But so it's a really neat place to check out. And of course, while you're there, I'll back up, you get to see this. So it's definitely an amazing place to visit. Everywhere around the Buffalo River is incredibly scenic and worth a trip all in itself.
So can you clarify that I was so excited to see that person reading the newspaper?
Yes.
That's actually a menu?
It is a menu. Sorry to disappoint you.
It's a big menu.
Yeah. So then I'll jump over to Dallas County, back up into Missouri, at a place called Windyville. And this is a place, I have talked about Windyville before occasionally in other presentations, and most people have heard of it for one reason. Has anyone heard of Windyville?
Yes.
Yes.
Been there.
Yes. What did you think of it?
There wasn't much there,
Well-
but doesn't it have some kind of a cult or?
Well, I think there's the School of Metaphysics, which is down the road. Yes. But the reason that people generally know of Windyville is because it's said to be haunted. It's got a very wide following for its supposedly paranormal existence. And at the heart of this town, like Julie said, there's not much left, but there is now a reopened general store, which is where this picture was taken from. Windyville, kind of like Topaz and the other communities we talked about, started out many years ago. This was an early picture of the store. It had your pretty typical Ozarky community things. The name of the town I find hilarious because it was supposedly named after the original settlers who had such long-winded tales that they had to call the place Windyville. But it started out here. That was in one of the early pictures. Unfortunately, it also fell into disrepair. People moved away. The community kind of dried up until just a couple of years ago, whenever someone came in and bought the store and completely restored it. And so today you can go and visit the Windyville store. You can also stay there, which is a great draw for people who are interested in ghost hunting because you can hang out and see if you think it's true. One of the really quirky little things about it, though, is you can see things like the original sign, which was salvaged as it was restored. But you can buy 15-cent bologna sandwiches in there. That was one of the things the owner wanted to do. Was she wanted to bring back something that people could reminisce about and also introduce a new generation to. So you can go in there and get yourself a 15-cent sandwich. And also, while you're there, you can check out the old cannery, which is behind the store, which I have been told they just recently started actually offering tours of. And I have not been inside. I was out there before they had gotten it ready to see, and was I can deal with gravel roads. I can't deal with random snakes. And I decided maybe I'd wait to tour this, or ghosts, because that's supposedly haunted too. But if you're out that way, get your sandwich, get a tour. I think they do the tours on Saturdays, but they're on Facebook, so you can check that out for sure on times and things like that. So the next place I'm going to mention is Bowes Hollow. It's another kind of settlement, except that this particular settlement is a fake town in the middle of nowhere, as I would call it. Bowes Hollow is it's out there. It's out kind of by Salem. But it is a village that's designed around the 1930s. And none of the buildings, as far as I'm aware, unless they've added new ones, are actually vintage. They built them all brand new. But they're all around the idea that this is what a 1930s village would look like. So you have, filled with different memorabilia and designs and displays. And it also ties in with this Model A theme, because that's how this originally started. Was the family were collectors. People wanted to come up and see their cars, and so it eventually grew into this attraction. So while you're at this town, While you're at this town, you can see, they've got all sorts of different buildings. They actually sell barbecue there, so you can get lunch while you're there, and you can take a ride in their car. That was what this first picture was taken from. So they'll take you on scenic tours around the area, once again with a road. So there's that tie-in with the presentation. But it's open seasonally, so if you're interested in visiting there, I would double check to make sure they're open again, but I think they open around March or April and stay open through October or so. The last couple places I'm going to talk about, I think they're last, is a really unique combination of places in Lamar. We very rarely see small towns that still have a movie theater, let alone both a drive-in and a movie theater, but Lamar has both. And it's a kind of a really cool story. They both managed to survive because of community support. They, both of them kind of had moments, especially, I guess, the main theater on the square, where it was kind of like, we have to decide if we're going to save this or it's going away. And the community stepped up and helped raise the money to restore it. And so both of these are now owned technically under a community betterment association who oversees them. But there's actually a family that is the primary overseers of them. They run them all year round. So the Barco drive-in stands for Barton County, it's in Lamar, where Barton County is. It goes back to the 1950s, and this is the screen. One really quirky part that is irrelevant to everything, except I find it interesting, is there's actually an apartment built into the screen. That's where one of the caretakers lived in the past. But anyway, during the summer months, this was an ad from the grand opening when it first opened. But it's still, during the summer, like I said, I think most weekends, maybe even during the week, they have showings out there of different movies. It's one picture from a recent thing. It's clearly still a very popular thing. I mean, and with so few drive-ins available these days, I would bet they get some traffic from far away. And this is the theater on the square, which is very interesting to me. It's Art Deco everywhere. Like, you go inside, looks super 30s, and it actually opened in the late 1930s. I think they are almost, they celebrated an anniversary last year. I think maybe it was 80th, or maybe 85th, but they have been around for a very long time. They did have a period where they closed for a brief number of years, but that's when the community stepped up and decided they wanted to reopen it, and it's been open ever since. You know, one thing that was interesting about its opening was it was a huge deal, as you can imagine, but a big enough deal that like stars were sending telegrams congratulating them on its opening, which makes you wonder what the deal was. I don't know what the connection, why they were aware. One thing, this is just purely speculation on my part, was it's been said that Clark Gable came through the Ozarks several times in the early years and stayed at the Boots in Carthage, which, you know, isn't next to Lamar, but not that far. And so I wonder if maybe he came through Lamar at some point and met the owner of the theater or something. But, you know, they're, once again, kind of like the bridge at the beginning, you know, you couldn't have photos of this as very easily as it was being constructed, and so the words had to describe to people what they were missing out on. And this was what the newspaper printed right as it was opening. It says, "It is truly a place of dreams. Its acoustics seem perfect. The coldest and the least imaginative visitor could not restrain an expression of delighted wonder when he trod the softly carpeted runways into the open spaces of the theater behind the subdued and harmonious blending loveliness." So, yeah. This is kind of what they saw in parts of it. This is in the auditorium itself. The murals, as per the caretaker, like I said, he does not believe they've ever been touched since the 1930s when they opened. And you can kind of see it's like this, you know, colonial type French scene, but there are details just everywhere that are really cool. This is the chandelier from the entryway. There, you know, are lights and backlit scenes and all sorts of things that are just make it an experience to go just see the theater itself. And, you know, another contrast with this theater is they typically run first run movies as opposed to waiting. They have enough community support that they tend to do that. So you may not get it the first weekend it's open, but it's never too long behind that. But all that said, I don't want to keep you guys here all day, even though I can keep talking all day. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that, like I said, I run a website where I get to write about a lot of different unique places, and people are generally interested in getting out and exploring different places. And so a few months ago, I decided to publish a few of these different places in a book, which I have some with me today. This is what the book looks like, and here's a physical copy of it. But it's got 61 different places to visit in the region. I've got photos and stories about each one. And it's my hope that people will take this and write in it and keep it in their car and just use it as a guidebook when they're going to be out and about and want something to do. And that said, I am happy for questions or comments, hopefully no tomato throwing. Anything else that you'd like to talk about. And I would also say that I have an email newsletter that goes out whenever I publish new stories. So if you would like to be added to that, just give me your email address and I'll add you. It's completely free. But thank you very much for letting me come present, and thank you for coming.
Well, Kaitlyn, this has been very enjoyable.
Oh, good.
I want to go to some of those places. When you mentioned that you had written an article about the Wizard of Odo.
Yes.
Our next program next month is going to be a gentleman that we ran into somewhere. I don't remember where we were, Linda.
Down at
Orlando's?
the fair, country fair.
Oh, the country fair down at wherever the
The Hillcrofters did?
Hillcrofters.
Oh, cool.
And he said he knew who the wizard really was,
Wow.
and he supposedly has proof. He's going to be here next month.
Wow.
Second Saturday, 2 o'clock. So if you want to know who the real Wizard of Oto was, he's supposed to let us know.
You might want to come early because Curtis Copeland is also interested in this and is going to tell everyone he knows. So we may very well have a full building, very possibly.
We hope.
We hope.
You never know. It's you know, people have other things to do. But does anybody have anything they'd like to talk to Kaitlyn about, or anything you want to know about the society? wait on dues and donations. And if anybody knows of any grants, we're happy to try to apply for those. And we want to preserve as much of the Ozarks as we can. So you might see or hear some things about the Wye Bridge. That needs some definite work on it. And we don't know who to ask to even get an estimate hardly. You know, who does bridges, you know, like that.
Who actually owns the Wye Bridge?
It's supposedly owned by the city of Galena,
Okay.
but they have no money, so I
I
mean,
know, really, yeah.
yeah.
So it's in disrepair even as
Where are
a
you from?
pedestrian bridge?
I'm from Webster
Yes,
County
there's
originally, but I live in Springfield now.
Springfield.
Yeah.
Well, you know, concrete, when it's 100 years old, starts to crumble, and there's places where the rebar is showing, and there's
Okay.
some pieces of concrete that have fallen into the river, which is not a good thing, because if it hits somebody as they're canoeing down, or if the Corps of Engineers decides it's a hazard,
They may take it out.
they may decide to take it out. But the last time somebody wanted to take it out, the Neighborhood Watch in Galena spent, I know, we raised 25,000, so we probably spent more than that on doing some repairs on it, but that's been 30 years ago. And it needs it again. And you know, you've always got the little darlings that go in there and take a hammer and start pounding on stuff if they see anything chipping away. So, if they'd let some of us take care of children like we took care of ours, they wouldn't do it more than once, but, you know, you're not allowed to even tell them no. So, that might be something you're gonna see or hear about if you're interested in working on that. Helping find somebody that could give us an estimate of what could be done with it, what it would cost. From what we heard last, the infrastructure is still pretty good. Now, it's survived the major flood that we had in, I think it must have been about 2008 and maybe 99, it was in the 80s or 90s. There was a major flood where the water was up to the bottom of the bridge. It was that high. I mean, there were refrigerators floating down the river.
And propane tanks.
And propane
I remember
tanks
that.
and cows.
Yeah.
I remember seeing cows too, people trying to pull them out. I mean, it survived that, and people looked at it and said it's still,
How much are your books? There's a lady that wants one.
They're 25.
yes, if you wanna buy books.
Yes, I have books. They're $25, and I've got a box of them, so I can give you as many as you want.
Yeah,
So
And we-
Kaitlyn, what's the farthest you've traveled to for a story that you've written? What do you consider to be your range?
Well, it's flexible because I can go wherever I want to. So generally, I stay over in Missouri on the Kansas side, but I will go down into Arkansas. Thank you. I will go down into Arkansas, and I do go over to, around that Salem area is about as far as I'll go on the eastern edge. Although, if there was something I wanted to do, I'd go farther. But it's just hard because I do this in my spare time, and so it's generally nights or weekends when I go places, and so it's a little difficult on a Saturday to get much farther than that and not be ready to pass out by the time I get back home. So those are the loose boundaries.
There's a little store, if it's still there, Iconium, Missouri. Have you been to that little store? It's up at Truman Lake.
Oh, Oconia?
Iconia.
Okay.
I can't remember which, but it's it's like that little town you had there.
Oh, really?
Not the only thing there, just a little store, but it's an old country store.
Well, thank you. I'll write it down and have to
They
look
was
it up.
there 4 or 5 years ago, 'cause she and I went up there and wandered around, and stopped there and bought a few things, so.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, and that's it. If you guys ever think of anything, please email me or let me know, because I love getting suggestions for stories, because a lot of the places I write about I don't know about until I randomly drive by them or somebody tells me.
Well, you was talking about that one in Jasper. I don't know how many times I've drove through Jasper.
Yeah.
And we've even stopped and ate or something at, a time or two.
Yeah.
I didn't Never heard of that place.
Yeah.
That's neat.
It's really neat, and yeah, it's just a very sweet place. They were also talking about how every year they do a Thanksgiving dinner, you know, for the community. I think it's maybe by donation only or some nominal fee, and all the money goes to a charity. You know, it's really nice. They're just very nice people.
Get out and wander around.
Well, thank you guys for coming. I'll be here for a while if you want to come up and chat, but thank you.